Everyone thought it was just another notice, a scrap of paper nailed to a gate like a warning left by some bored city clerk. But when I saw the rusted 6-inch nail driven straight through the red sheet, bleeding into the wood of my front gate, I knew something was off. This wasn't just paper. It was a shot fired, a declaration. Emergency repossession notice, HOA mandate 14D violation. Vacate by Friday or face removal. The kicker, I don't have an HOA. Not one I ever signed up for. Not one that has a single shred of jurisdiction on my farm. But apparently, Karen Whitaker, the queen of clipboards herself, decided the borders of Simmons Valley could stretch like elastic, and she wanted my land inside her grasp. I should have laughed it off, tossed it in the burn barrel and gone back to my goats chewing on tin cans like they were part of a demolition crew. But 30 minutes later, I learned just how serious this HOA was willing to play. A black SUV rolled up my gravel drive, tires crunching like slow thunder. Out stepped 2 men, cargo pants, tactical vests, and an air of self-importance so thick it might as well have been sprayed on with their cologne. One had a clipboard. The other carried a sidearm and the kind of buzz cut that whispered, "Almost police, but not quite." Clipboard guy cleared his throat like he was about to announce martial law. "Sir, we're here to conduct a visual inspection on behalf of the Simmons Valley HOA." I blinked the longest blink of my life. "You got a warrant." He smiled in a way only people with no authority can smile. Under Municipal Subcode Emergency Protocol, perimeter verification is authorized without resident consent. Which was a long, shiny string of words that boiled down to no. No, they had nothing. No warrant, no badge, no law, just khakis, radios, and a fantasy. I stepped in front of him, my voice calm, my stare hard. "You're not coming near my barn with that attitude or that vest." The second guy adjusted his stance, one hand hovering just close enough to his holster to make sure I saw it. A silent dare, but I'd grown up with rough hands and rougher lessons. Fear wasn't something I kept stocked in my barn. "Unless you're law enforcement," I said slowly, "or holding a legally binding warrant, you're trespassing." Clipboard guy just grinned wider like my resistance was exactly what he wanted. He pulled out his phone, thumbed the screen. "We'll be nodding your resistance. This will escalate." "Oh, I hope so," I told him, "because I love paperwork." They turned back to their SUV, and that's when I noticed it. A laminated badge taped crooked to the inside of the windshield. HOA seal homemade, the kind of fake ID that looked printed at the corner copy shop next to a sandwich board ad for toner cartridges. I snapped a photo. Plate number, badge, faces, locked in my phone forever. That night I uploaded it to the Simmons Valley Community Board, captioned it, "New HOA cosplay unit spotted. Looks like Blackwater took over lawn care." Within minutes the comments poured in. One neighbor wrote, "Same guys knocked on my barn last week. Said they needed to inspect the grain bins for health violations." Another, "This isn't compliance, this is intimidation." And then old man Duffy, 4 houses down, left the comment that chilled me, "Told y'all years ago. Karen's HOA ain't a neighborhood group, it's a damn cult." I laughed at first. A cult, really? But the sound died quick when my phone rang. I didn't need to check the ID, I already knew who it was. "Mr. Callahan?" Karen's voice purred down the line, smug, clipped, dripping with the kind of confidence only people drunk on their own rules could summon. "I'm calling to confirm you received the notice." "You mean the one illegally nailed to my gate?" "Nailed is such a harsh word. We prefer secured for visibility, and it's not illegal under the new emergency expansion guidelines." "Which guidelines?" "The ones we voted on last quarter." Funny thing, I wasn't at that meeting. Neither was anyone outside Simmons Valley, but Karen didn't blink. "It was for residents only," she said flatly. "I'm not in Simmons Valley." Her pause was short, sharp, a knife sliding between words. "You are now," and then she hung up. That night when the sun sank low and the goats curled into the barn shadows, I noticed something else. Orange survey flags stabbing into the north field, lined in neat little rows like stitches across my land. I didn't put them there, but my goats found them, chewing one flag like it owed them rent. I yanked the nearest stake from the ground. Black marker coordinates scrawled across plastic. They weren't bluffing, they were mapping. For the first time in years, a chill crawled up my spine. Because Karen hadn't just claimed authority. She planted her flag in my soil, and with it, a war I hadn't asked for but one I was about to fight. It didn't start with sirens. It started with a voice, a megaphone splitting the morning air while I was pouring coffee in the kitchen. This is the compliance division of the Simmons Valley HOA. Step outside immediately. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. The kind of dream where everything feels off, but your body hasn't caught up to the panic yet. Then the flash of amber lights cut across my window, bouncing against the wood grain of my front door. No police blues, just the kind of hazard strobes you buy off the internet if you've got more ego than authority. I stepped out onto the porch in an old t-shirt that read "Fence me in. I dare you." And there they were. 4 trucks idling at the end of my gravel drive, matte black, dust-caked, with stenciled numbers on their sides like a budget paramilitary convoy. Each door bore a taped decal, Civic Enforcement, Simmons Valley Compliance Division. 6 people climbed out, khaki gear, steel-toe boots, radios clipped to their belts. One man carried a drone remote like he was about to deploy a military op. Another clutched a laminated folder like it was a badge of honor. And then, like the curtain rising on a villain's big scene, Karen herself stepped out of the lead truck. Sunglasses, clipboard, and a windbreaker that probably cost more than my tractor. "Good morning," she said sweetly, like she was delivering cookies and not a threat. "We're here to initiate Phase 2 of your compliance review." I sipped my coffee slow, keeping my voice calm. "Did Phase 1 get lost in the mail?" "You received proper notice," she shot back. "You chose not to respond. We are now authorized to inspect and seize any structure or material in breach of code." I raised an eyebrow. "Which code?" Her smile sharpened. "Simmons Valley's Extended Covenant, Article C. There's no such thing. It was ratified at the last board meeting." "There is no board." She tilted her head like a schoolteacher tired of repeating herself. "There is now." And with a flick of her wrist, she gave the order. Her squad moved with what they thought was military precision, splitting off like soldiers in a bad YouTube reenactment. 2 made for the barn. One launched the drone, its whine filling the sky like a wasp. Another started packing the fence line, jotting notes like recon. That's when I stepped off the porch, one hand in my hoodie pocket. Calm, steady, dangerous. "Sir," one of them warned, "please don't interfere." "Why?" "Planning to arrest me for walking on my own land." "We're here under community authority." "No," I said flatly. "You're here playing dress-up in khakis." Karen kept her composure, but I saw the twitch in her jaw. She stepped closer, her sunglasses catching the reflection of my porch light. "We can do this peacefully or escalate. Your choice." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You brought 6 rental troopers and a drone to inspect a barn." "It's not just the barn. It's the unauthorized fencing, the livestock violations, and the unregistered utility hookup." I tilted my head. "Funny, that barn, been here 30 years. The goats were born on this land, and the utility hookups, county issued, want to see the paperwork." Her silence was telling. She wasn't here for truth, she was here for control. Then she waved 2 of her goons forward. They made it 6 steps before I whistled. Loud, piercing. From the barn, the goats answered, bleeding in chaos like a cavalry charge. Maggie, the biggest of the bunch, barreled out first, horns low, the others following. The men froze. One stumbled backward. "They don't like strangers," I said coolly, "especially ones carrying radios." Karen's phone came up recording, her voice clipped and cold. "Just another example of escalating hostility from a non-compliant resident. We're documenting this." I leaned toward the lens, gave her my best grin. "Smile harder, Karen. That footage will look real good when subpoenaed." And then, like fate had finally decided to pick a side, a new vehicle rolled up the drive. A marked sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Ramirez stepped out. Calm, legit, the weight of an actual badge gleaming on his chest. He looked at me, then at Karen, then at her little compliance army. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his tone measured but sharp. Karen stiffened. We're in the middle of an HOA enforcement operation. Please stand down. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. You're what? These residents are in violation of multiple codes. We're executing a legal inspection. He turned to me. Did you invite these folks? Nope. Do you consent to this inspection? Absolutely not. Ramirez's voice hardened. Then they're trespassing. Ma'am, you and your unit need to vacate this property immediately. And that drone, it's illegal to fly over private agricultural land without clearance. Karen's mask cracked. Just for a second, her eyes twitched with rage. She hissed under her breath, so low only I could hear. I hope your niece enjoys applying for scholarships from an off-grid property with multiple violations. Her words slid under my skin like barbed wire. She crossed a line. The trucks pulled away in stiff formation, but not before I caught the hesitation of one younger recruit. He looked at the barn, then at me, his face cracking with doubt, just for a moment. Then Karen barked his name and the mask snapped back on. As they disappeared, I walked to the barn, dragging my hand along the weathered wood. My father built it with his own hands, calling it the Freedom Box, said it would outlast any rulebook, but now it had a drone's lens pointed right at it. And for the first time in my life, I realized Karen wasn't just bluffing. She was playing a long game. And if I didn't act fast, my family's legacy wouldn't just be threatened, it would be erased. It was just past midnight when I heard the crunch of boots on gravel at the back fence. No headlights, no cruiser, just a silhouette framed in the glow of my barn's security lamp. Luke, my brother. Sheriff's badge or not, he came quiet, carrying nothing but a six-pack and the look of a man who'd seen enough of the world to know this wasn't just neighborly drama anymore. He dropped onto the porch swing like we were kids again, swaying slow in the summer air. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just the creak of wood and the faint sound of goats butting heads against the fence rails. That was textbook Karen, he finally said, cracking open a beer. Full show, all smoke. Then why does it feel like it's working? My voice was low, bitter. I told him about the flags, the trucks, the drone, the threats against my niece. He listened, jaw tight, saying nothing until I was done. Because you're not just a target anymore, he muttered. You're a headline, she takes you down, the rest fold. I didn't like the sound of that. She threatened my niece, Luke. Then she's scared, and when people like her get scared, they push harder, faster. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're not the first one she's come after, 3 counties, maybe 4, people signing over land to avoid lawsuits they can't afford, all buried in HOA jargon no one voted on. I felt a weight in my chest. She's not smart enough to build all this. No, he agreed, but she's ruthless enough to run it. He looked at me with the kind of seriousness that strips away every trace of brotherly banter. I'll be in position, but I can't interfere unless she crosses a line. She already has. He took a long pull from the bottle, then set it down with a dull thud. Then get proof, clean, solid, keep your head on straight. Proof, that was the word rattling in my skull when he left. The problem wasn't finding proof. Karen's arrogance left crumbs everywhere. The problem was surviving long enough to put them together. The sabotage started small, tools left in the wrong place. A gate that I swore I'd latched swinging open at dawn. Fence wires loose where they should have been taut. At first I chalked it up to farm chaos. Goats testing boundaries, wind shifting, life being messy. But then the power cut. Twice. Not a storm, not a grid failure, just sudden blackouts, both times when my cameras were uploading footage to cloud storage. That's when the air shifted. This wasn't random. This was inside work. I combed through the logs, motion sensors, footage. Every glitch happened during shifts covered by one guy, Darren. Tall, soft-spoken, newly hired, came recommended by a neighbor, never late, never loud, too perfect. And lately he'd been asking the wrong kinds of questions, not about goats or feed schedules, about systems. Where? The backup generator. Do you keep solar redundancy? You got a backup to the backup. Helpful on the surface. But one night I noticed him walking the fence line with his phone angled not outward, but up. Chest height, screen glowing, camera lens catching the barn loft window. Exactly where I kept the safe. That night I tested him. Built a decoy shed, left a binder inside labeled Property Transfer Options Confidential. Filled it with blank paper. Left it unlocked. 3 days later, it was gone. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Sometimes silence tells you more than questions ever could. At 11:17 p.m. on a Thursday, the well cam pinged motion. I pulled up the feed. There he was, hoodie up, flashlight in one hand, messenger bag over his shoulder, creeping across my land like it owed him rent. I grabbed the one thing I knew I'd need and stepped into the cold. Caught him near the pump house. "Forget to clock out?" I asked. He spun, dropped the flashlight, dropped the bag, bolted. Instinct took over. I chased. We tore through the pasture, mud sucking at our boots, breath burning in the cold air. He didn't know the land like I did. He tripped on an irrigation pipe, went down hard. I was on him before he could scramble up. "Let's talk." "It's not what it looks like," he stammered. "Then you better say something smart in the next 10 seconds. He paused and something snapped. He didn't beg. He got angry. "You think you're some kind of hero, sitting on stolen land, barking orders like you're better than the rest of us. Karen told me what this place really is." My grip tightened. "Karen told you." She showed me documents. Said your family rigged the original land deal. Said this was always supposed to go back to the community. I almost laughed. "Karen Whitaker, HOA president, told you my dad was a land thief. She said you wouldn't listen, that you were a risk." I shoved him back into the dirt. "So cutting fences, killing power, sabotaging cameras, that's your community service." He said nothing, just reached for the bag. Inside, a burner phone, a tablet, a hand-sketched map of my property, notes in red ink, trigger points, blind spots, access paths, and one phrase underlined twice: evacuation trigger, November 4th. I checked the date, 2 days away. The blood in my veins went cold. I powered on the tablet. It launched to a folder titled Phase 3, Callahan. Inside were surveillance photos, power usage charts, camera stills from angles I'd never installed, and a PDF priority report, subject non-compliant, acceleration recommended. At the bottom, authorization initials, K. Whitaker. No more guessing, no more wondering. Karen wasn't reacting to me. She was orchestrating the whole play, and if Darren's notes were right, her next move wasn't going to be a clipboard or a fine. It was going to burn everything I owned to the ground. The next morning, the world felt heavier. I'd spent the night sitting in the barn, Darren's bag on one side of me, my father's old tin coffee mug on the other. Sleep never came. Just the steady drum of dread and the weight of a tablet filled with surveillance files I never took. By sunrise, Luke was there, jaw locked, eyes tired. I showed him everything, maps, photos, the report with Karen's initials. He didn't speak until he'd read every word, then he cursed under his breath. "This isn't just harassment, this is structured, coordinated." "Karen signed it," I said. "She's not smart enough to put this together, but she's ruthless enough to run it." I pulled something else from Darren's bag, papers. Legal documents stamped, processed, and filed. My name scrawled across a quitclaim deed I never signed. Filed under co-ownership with an entity called Mason Ridge Holdings. Luke's face hardened. "She's trying to sell your land out from under you." I sprinted to the barn loft, opened the safe, and pulled out the real deed. Thick paper, yellowed edges, my father's wet signature bold across the bottom. I laid it beside the forgery. Identical layout, ink, even the file number. But the forgery bore one fatal flaw. It wasn't a wet signature. It was scanned, pasted, filed weeks ago. "She's got the county on her side," Luke muttered. "Someone stamped this through." Fraud, theft, treason in ink and paper. My father always said the law wasn't stone. It was paper, and paper can be rewritten if you own enough pens. That night I sat on the barn bench, the one Dad built from reclaimed pine. I dug through the old lock box he left me, labeled in faded red Sharpie, mule dust, our code word from the time I was 9. Back then, I'd asked him what eminent domain meant. He told me, "It means the government thinks your land's worth more to them than to you. They call it progress. You call it theft." He'd winked. "Always bury the receipts." Inside the box were decades of records, surveys, permits, letters dating back to the 80s. and one thick spiral notebook, land disputes settled and unsettled. Dad had logged every challenge, every zoning attempt. One name circled in red ink over and over, Karen Whitaker. I flipped to February 1991. A subdivision proposal. Luxury homes, clubhouse, tennis courts, filed by Karen back when she was just a junior agent. Stamped DENIED, zoning conflict, environmental overlap, structural impact too high. My father's handwriting in the margin, she'll try again, not with a company, with paper. And suddenly it all clicked. This wasn't just about control, this wasn't just about greed. For Karen, this was personal. A memory hit me like a hammer. I was 9 years old, legs dangling from the porch step. Karen at the gate in a blazer and heels, clipboard in hand, hair tied tight. She was already pretending to own the county. My father had met her halfway down the drive. "Mr. Callahan," she'd said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot." Dad had narrowed his eyes. "You don't get a second foot if you use the first one to kick down the door." "This property could be worth triple," she pressed. "You'd be doing the community a service." The answer's still no. Her smile had been brittle, not the face of defeat, but of someone patient enough to wait 30 years for revenge. Back in the barn, Luke and I laid the papers side by side, Dad's notes, the forged deed, Darren's maps. Piece by piece, the picture formed. This wasn't an HOA overreach. This was a machine, a development contract linking Mason Ridge Holdings to a silent fund called Emergent Valley Growth Trust. And there it was in black ink, Phase 1 Redevelopment Opportunity Zone. My land, signed by Karen. Co-signed by the county zoning chief, Zachary Lauren. The same man who'd sat across from me over coffee 2 weeks earlier and said, "I hope you never sell this place. There's something sacred about land with history." Now his name was on the contract to erase it. Luke muttered something under his breath, then pulled out his phone. "This isn't fraud anymore." "Then what is it?" "Strategic acquisition, built on intimidation, forgery, and fear, and it runs deeper than Karen." The barn felt colder, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Later that night, I found another relic buried in Dad's box, an old cassette tape labeled Town Hall, February 1991. I dusted off his cassette player, hit play. The recording crackled, but the voices were clear enough. Karen's voice, younger but already sharp. "This proposal benefits everyone. We need housing, infrastructure, progress." "My father, you mean concrete and control. You're holding back the future. I'm protecting the present. You're making this personal. Only because you made it first." Silence, then the faint sound of someone clapping before the tape cut off. My father hadn't been paranoid. He'd been preparing for the war I was now standing in the middle of. And Karen, she wasn't improvising. She was following a script she'd written 3 decades ago. The problem was she wasn't just writing anymore. She was erasing. And if I didn't stop her, the farm my father built, the freedom box, the goats, the fences, the soil itself, would vanish under concrete and legal ink, leaving nothing behind but a footnote in someone else's master plan. It started like a storm before sunrise. Not loud, not sudden, just pressure. The kind of stillness that makes dogs restless and turns the air sharp against your skin. I felt it before I saw it, like the land itself knew what was coming. At 9:04 a.m. they arrived. 5 SUVs, black, engines rumbling, tires spitting gravel like gunfire. They didn't pull up polite this time. They invaded, sliding into my drive like they were breaching a compound. Karen stepped out first. Beige blazer, dark sunglasses, a face carved from arrogance. She carried a document in her hand like it was the 10 Commandments. Behind her, 8 so-called compliance officers poured out of the vehicles, radios clipped to their belts, zip ties dangling like trophies, clipboards clutched like weapons. "Mr. Callahan," Karen's voice carried across the valley, "you've left us no choice." She raised the paper high for everyone to see. "Under emergency HOA directive, this property is hereby placed under administrative hold pending full inspection." I took one look at it and shook my head. Unless it's signed by a judge, Karen, it's just decorative garbage. "You're in violation." "No," I said, "you're in denial." Her jaw tightened. She gave her unit a sharp nod. Two peeled off toward the south gate. One moved for the barn, crowbar in hand. Another wore a body cam, recording every second like this was a training video for how not to get sued into the Stone Age. I raised my voice, calm but sharp enough to cut. Everything you're doing is being recorded. 5 cameras, 2 deputies watching live, a county lawyer reviewing the feed, so by all means, please keep going. That made them hesitate. A few glanced at each other, doubt flickering in their eyes. But Karen, she pressed forward, refusing to let the cracks show. "We have jurisdiction," she snapped. "No," I said, "you have delusions. We are acting on behalf of the community." I spread my arms. Which part? The part suing you or the part filming this disaster? That was it, the mask broke. "Proceed," she barked. And that's when the first mistake was made. One of her recruits, barely 20, reached the barn door and laid a hand on the handle. Bad move. Plan B activated. Motion sensors triggered. Spotlights snapped on. Sirens wailed through hidden speakers across the property, and then a voice thundered across the valley, deep, commanding, impossible to ignore. "This is Sheriff Callahan. You are trespassing on private property under investigation. Step away from the building immediately." Karen flinched. 2 of her squad stumbled back, eyes wide. The man with the crowbar dropped it, metal clanging against the gravel. One of them whispered loud enough to catch on my cameras. She said we had clearance. She said we were covered. But Karen didn't turn, didn't even blink. That was her second mistake. Because from the rear pasture, another figure emerged. Don Wallace, my neighbor, wide-brimmed hat, clean boots, thick legal file in hand. "Ms. Whitaker," he called, his voice calm but cutting. "You've crossed onto my land." Karen spun, snapping. "This is part of the Simmons Valley zoning tract." "No," Don interrupted. "That tract ends 23 feet west. This is private property, and this," he held up the folder, "is a cease and desist order effective immediately." Karen laughed, a brittle sound. "This is a community enforcement action." "That's funny," Don said, "because the community just filed a class action lawsuit against your organization. Fraud, harassment, illegal property seizure, and the judge who signed this order, she lives 2 blocks from me." Her face cracked, not all at once, piece by piece, first her eyes, then her mouth, then silence. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I stepped forward, voice steady. "Already did, back in 1991 when we offered you lemonade." And then the real law arrived. 4 county cruisers, silent, doors swinging open in perfect rhythm. Deputies fanned out, calm, confident, every move sharp with purpose. Luke climbed out of the lead car, shoulders squared, a signed warrant in his hand. Fraud, forgery, unlawful impersonation of law enforcement, civil code violations stacked like a tower of bricks. Karen's sunglasses hid her eyes, but her voice shook when she said, "You can't arrest me." Luke smirked. "That's adorable, but yes, I can." The cuffs clicked. No screaming, no fighting, just silence and the hollow weight of defeat. Her so-called officers folded instantly. One tried to run, made it 10 feet. Another just sat on the gravel, hands in his hair, muttering, "Can I still qualify as a whistleblower?" Luke's deputy didn't miss a beat. "If you talk fast." Neighbors had gathered by then. Some cheering, some filming. One teenage girl shouted, "That's the lady who fined us for putting up Halloween lights." Mrs. Delaney rolled up in her golf cart, parked at the gate, and raised a glass of sweet tea like it was champagne. "Told you," she said. "Woman's HOA Hitler with a hyphenated last name." But as Karen was loaded into the cruiser, her shoulders stiff, her silence louder than any outburst could have been, a chill cut through me. Because just as the deputies bagged evidence from her SUV, one called out, "Sheriff, you're gonna want to see this." A tablet, one email, no sender, no message, just a subject line, reassignment, pilot zone, Midwest beta. And beneath it, coordinates, not here, somewhere else. Karen wasn't the architect, she was just the pilot program. And what those coordinates pointed to? Someone else's land, someone who hadn't fought back yet. By sunset, Karen's mugshot was plastered on every news site from here to the county line. HOA president arrested for fraudulent raids. The footage ran on Channel 9 twice before dinner, showing her being led away, stiff as a mannequin, sunglasses gone but pride still clinging to her face like glue. My face was blurred. Hers was. Neighbors came out of hiding that night. Some clapped me on the back. Others left jars of jam, pickles, or beer on the porch like offerings at an altar. But none of it felt like victory. Not really. Because while Karen's empire cracked under her own arrogance, the thing that kept me awake wasn't her. It was the email. Reassignment, pilot zone, Midwest beta, coordinates attached. The phrase played over in my head like a broken record. Pilot zone. Meaning Karen wasn't the start, she was a test run, and those coordinates, they weren't mine, they were 2 counties over. I didn't wait, at dawn I drove. The road wound through fields still damp with dew, mist curling along the ditches like smoke from a fire I couldn't see. When I reached the spot, I half expected empty land, maybe another farm like mine. Instead, I found her. Grace Harlow, rancher, mid-30s, tough eyes, calloused hands. She met me at her gate, rake in one hand like she'd use it as a weapon if she had to. "If you're here about code enforcement, turn around," she snapped. "Not exactly," I said, holding out the forged deed Darren had stolen from me. She froze, her face drained pale as paper. She disappeared into her shed and came back with a manila envelope. She handed it to me without a word. Inside, a letter, HOA header, same boilerplate wording as mine. Phase 1 redevelopment opportunity zone, threats of fines, deadlines, and a new name at the bottom, not Karen's, but one we'd seen before, Mason Ridge Holdings. Grace's voice cracked. They told me I was in violation of new agricultural codes, that if I didn't sign, I'd lose the ranch. I thought maybe it was just me. I shook my head. It's not just you, it's a playbook, and Karen, she wasn't the author. We spent hours comparing files. My photos, her letters, Darren's maps. By nightfall, Grace wasn't just a neighbor, she was an ally. 2 weeks later, she filed an injunction with the state attorney's office, armed with every shred of proof I could give her. 3 weeks later, her HOA went silent. Their website down, their office shuttered. Their compliance officers vanished like smoke in the wind. But it didn't stop there. Word spread, first to another rancher in Missouri, then to a family in Illinois, then 2 more in different states. Same story, different names, same shell companies, same blueprint. This wasn't Karen's obsession anymore. This was a network, a machine grinding across the Midwest, one property at a time. I handed everything to a contact Luke trusted in the state attorney general's office. They didn't promise justice. They didn't promise headlines. They just asked for silence. Investigation takes time, they said. But the message was clear. We're not just looking at your HOA, we're looking at the people behind it. Back home, I tried to breathe again, tried to remember what normal sounded like. Goats bleating in the barn, fence wire humming taut in the wind, the clink of tools on the workbench. For a few days, it almost felt like peace. I rebuilt the barn door, sanded the porch steps, upgraded the cameras. The goats went back to being the most dangerous thing on the property. But I didn't go back to who I was before. I walked the fence line every morning, not just to check the wire, but to remember. To remind myself that power doesn't always come with a badge or a gun. Sometimes it comes with a clipboard, a forged signature, and a smile that hides a knife. Some neighbors waved again, others still turned their backs. Fear lingers long after the threat is gone, but Mrs. Delaney dropped off a jar of pickles and a note that made me laugh out loud. Next time, run for mayor, or sheriff, or God. I didn't run, I built, I prepared, and I waited. Because a month after Karen's arrest, another message came. Not a phone call, not an email. A black envelope nailed to my gate with the same kind of rusted spike that started all of this. No return address, no letter, just a wax seal and a single card inside. One symbol, a triangle overlaid with a house. And beneath it, another set of coordinates. I sat on the porch for hours, the card in my hands, the goats restless in the pasture. Thought about burning it, thought about driving there. Instead, I locked it in Dad's old box with the label Mule Dust. because maybe someday someone else would need it, and when they did, they wouldn't be starting from scratch. I used to think Karen was the monster at the end of the hallway. Turns out, she was just the shadow the real monster cast. The black envelope sat on my table for days, unopened except for that single card I couldn't unsee. A triangle overlaid with a house. Coordinates typed in neat, sterile font. No sender, no explanation, just a message, you're not done. Luke stopped by the next evening, still in uniform. He took one look at the envelope, then at me. You didn't drive there, did you? No. Good, he folded his arms, heavy and deliberate. That's bait. Or a warnings. He shook his head. People like this don't warn, they test, they measure, they see how far they can push before you break. The words gnawed at me, because I wanted to break. I wanted to put my truck in gear, follow those coordinates, and see what snake pit waited on the other end. But I remembered my father's words, security through confusion. If they don't know where the line is, they can't cross it. So I didn't cross it, not yet. Instead, I started noticing things. Little things at first like I had with Darren. A stranger at the feed store who watched too long as I paid. A drone buzzing overhead that didn't belong to Karen's crew. It was sleeker, quieter, military gray. A white van parked at the far edge of the road 3 days in a row, engine idling, driver never stepping out. Luke said I was paranoid, but he also increased patrols near my property off the record. Just in case, he said, which told me he didn't think I was paranoid at all. Then came the fire. It was subtle, almost surgical. Not a barn blaze, not a field torching. Just a small stack of lumber near the west fence, set alight in the dead of night. Enough to glow red against the sky, enough to wake me in a panic, enough to tell me someone had crossed the line again. I doused it before it spread, heart-pounding ash clinging to my skin. And as I did, I noticed something scratched into the dirt near the fire pit. 3 shapes crudely drawn, a triangle, a square, a circle, overlapping. Not Karen's style, too calculated, too clean. The next morning, the mail brought more proof. A letter, no return address, no signature. Just a single sheet of paper with 6 words typed dead center. Paper isn't permanent, memory isn't safe. I read it 3 times, each word heavier than the last. Someone out there wasn't just watching me. They knew about Dad's lockbox. They knew about the old deeds and surveys hidden under my floorboards. They knew memory, my memory, was the last thing standing between them and the land. That night, I took the box from its hiding place and carried it to the barn. Opened every envelope, every folded map, every survey. Spread them across the floorboards like a battlefield. My father's handwriting stared back at me, circles, arrows, underlined names. Karen's circled more than once, but other names too, developers, attorneys, firms that had gone bankrupt only to resurface years later under new names. One name in particular kept appearing, not Mason Ridge Holdings, something older. A fund my father had scribbled in the margins of multiple entries, Emergent Valley Growth Trust. I Googled it, nothing, not a trace. But the handwriting was his, he'd known, 30 years ago he'd known. I was still piecing it together when the barn lights flickered, then cut. Silence, darkness thick as tar. Then the drone. I heard it before I saw it. A low hum circling above the roofline. I grabbed the shotgun, stepped into the yard. The night sky was empty except for that faint whir, the red blink of a camera lens staring down like an unblinking eye. I raised the barrel, fired once. The drone spiraled, smoke trailing, pieces scattering into the field. And just as I lowered the gun, headlights flashed from the road. Not Karen's khaki-clad recruits this time. This was different, cleaner. 4 vehicles, white, unmarked, pulling into formation at the edge of my property. They didn't step out, didn't shout demands, didn't wave clipboards. They just sat there, engines idling, a wall of steel and silence. I stood on my porch, shotgun resting on my shoulder, waiting. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, the lead vehicle rolled down a window. A man's silhouette, backlit by a dashboard glow, raised his hand. Not a wave, not a threat, just a gesture. A triangle drawn in the air with 2 fingers. Then, without a word, the convoy reversed. Tires crunching gravel, engines fatting into the distance. I stood there long after they'd gone, the symbol burning in my mind. Karen was gone, but the people behind her weren't. And they'd just introduced themselves. The morning after the convoy, the air felt different. Not lighter, not safer, just different. Like the valley itself knew the game had changed. Karen was gone, her empire in ashes, her name dragged through the mud on every news station that could spell fraud. But the real players, they'd finally stepped out from behind the curtain, and all they left me with was a symbol. A triangle, a house, a message I couldn't ignore. Luke stopped by again, this time without the badge. Just my brother, looking older than I remembered, wearier too. He found me walking the fence line, shotgun slung across my back like a habit I couldn't break. "They're not done," he said flatly. "I know. You should think about leaving, sell, move, start over somewhere quiet." I stopped, turned, stared at him like he'd spoken in another language. "This land isn't just dirt, Luke. It's Dad's hands, Mom's prayers, every step I've ever taken that meant something. You think I can just walk away?" He sighed deep, heavy. "Then you'd better be ready." But I was already ready. Over the next week, I fortified the farm like it was a fortress. Cameras doubled. Fences reinforced. Hidden caches of documents sealed in waterproof tubes and buried in marked spots only I knew. I uploaded copies of every file, every forged deed, every tape Dad left behind to encrypted servers. If they came for me again, I wasn't going down quietly. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was just patching leaks on a dam already cracking. Then the letter came. Hand-delivered, no stamp. A simple sheet of heavy cream paper tucked under a rock on my porch. No name, no address, just 7 words typed in a font too clean to feel real. Phase 1 complete, Phase 2 imminent, Midwest Beta. And beneath it, those same coordinates from the black envelope. I read it 5 times, each word like ice water in my veins. Then I folded it, tucked it into the lockbox labeled Mule Dust, and sat on the porch until the sun sank behind the ridge. That night I dreamed of my father. He was younger in the dream, the way I remember him before the gray hair, before the cough that stole him. He was building the barn, hammer in hand, sweat streaking his shirt. He looked at me, eyes clear as the sky, and said, "They can only take it if you forget what it's worth." I woke with tears I didn't bother wiping away. The next day I drove 2 counties over, to Grace Harlow's ranch. She was waiting, strong as ever, rake still in her hand like it was an extension of her arm. "You got one too?" she asked. I nodded, handed her the letter. She pulled an identical one from her pocket, same words, same coordinates. We didn't need to speak, we just knew. This wasn't about Karen anymore. It wasn't about one HOA, it wasn't even about Simmons Valley. This was a blueprint, a network stretching further than we could see. We sat at her kitchen table, files spread across the wood grain, coffee steaming between us. She asked me the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. What do we do? I thought of my father's lockbox, the notes, the maps, the cassette tape from '91. I thought of the drone hovering over my barn, the convoy drawing their triangle in the night air. And then I thought of Karen, smug, unshakable, until the moment the cuffs closed around her wrists. Proof, I said finally. We gather it, we bury it in places they can't reach, and when the time comes, we burn them with their own paper. Grace nodded. Then we're not alone anymore. We were. Because within a month there were 5 of us. Then 10. Farmers, ranchers, families across 3 states. Different names, different faces, but the same scar. Each one holding letters, deeds, threats, all stamped with the same hidden hand. A quiet alliance formed. Files encrypted. Documents copied and mailed out of state. Secrets kept alive like embers waiting for the right wind. For the first time since this started, I didn't feel cornered. I felt like part of something larger. But hope is a dangerous thing. Because the night before Christmas, another black envelope landed on my gate. Same wax seal, same heavy paper, but this time no coordinates, no words, just a single photo inside. Grainy, taken from a distance. Me on the porch. My niece sitting beside me, smiling. The caption typed beneath, "Memory isn't safe." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the barn, shotgun across my knees, the photo pinned to the wall in front of me, staring, waiting, breathing. And as the sun rose over Simmons Valley, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. Karen was never the enemy. She was just the first wave. And if that email was right, if Midwest Beta was only the beginning, then the real storm wasn't coming. It was already here. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one.